lifetime member of Immanuel Lutheran Church, which is celebrating its 135th anniversary year. Today is a very special one, as we have with us the pastor who built our present church edifice, the Reverend Dr. Eric J. Gustavson, and his lovely wife, Violet. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Edna.
Well, you also have special days right now, don't you? It's your 80th birthday.
Right.
In May, I guess, wasn't it?
No, it's April.
Was it April?
I'll give you one extra year.
That's right. Also, the 55th anniversary of your graduation from college.
That's right.
Now, what college was that?
Gustavson Sr. in St. Peter, Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. I see. And let's see, in Minnesota, that's right. It would be because you were up there. And it's a special celebration year, your 50th anniversary of your ordination. Well, it was celebrated yesterday. Was that the day or just a special?
No, it was the day of the convocation at the seminary, so we were involved in that whole procedure.
I see. And where were you ordained?
So ordained in Brooklyn, New York, in the old Bethlehem Lutheran Church, downtown Brooklyn.
Oh, for goodness sakes. And then from there, where was your first church?
My first church was in St. Peter, right on the edge of the college campus where I received my degree.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very exciting new type of ministry for me. Had many of my former professors and classmates and so on were members of the church. So it was a very interesting place.
Well, I should think it was. Well, now let's see. In 1950, I think it was, our board issued a call to you to come to be our pastor. Can you tell us, was that in 1950 or was that 49? Do you remember?
Well, in a way, I hesitate to disagree with Edna.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're usually right.
No, not always.
But it was really in July 28, 1949.
1949 in November.
Yes, but I received a call in July of the 28th. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, it might be of some interest that today, at the communion service, I shook hands with the one person who still remains alive, Bob Kinsman, who's the only remaining member of that call committee.
Is that right? What do you know?
Which is quite an experience for me.
That's
so
what.
much that happens.
Yes. The people are dwindling now that we knew in those days. And well, how did you feel about getting the call here?
Well, I was really excited about it. We didn't like to leave New England because we had a beautiful parish there and a good future too. But Immanuel offered unusual opportunities, we felt. And because we had a very deep sense of tradition as far as the old Augustana Lutheran Church was concerned, and this being really one of the first churches with great historical significance, we felt that the ministry of this church, which had been started then almost 100 years before, ought to continue. And we thought somehow we had a very strong feeling that we were called to be here at that particular time. And it was an exciting opportunity. We felt honored, of course.
Well, that's wonderful. And you did come. You saw the place, and you saw the neighborhood and everything. And there was one thing that you said when you agreed to come. Do you remember what that was?
Well, I don't know if there was anything that I said that was that significant that I could remember it that long, but I think maybe what you're referring to is that we had a very interesting meeting of the church council at that time. It was down at the Merchandise Mart, and I was reminded of that yesterday when we drove here from the south side. And I thought that place has very significant meaning for me because the church council of the Immanuel Church met there then, and they were discussing the possibility of a call, and they were wondering what kind of an agenda I would have if I were to come here. And I said, well, of course, number one would be that we complete that beautiful structure that already started 30 years before. But let's put a big monument to the history of the church on that corner. And one lady, I think it was Mrs. Forge, you remember her, who asked, well, now, how do you feel that can be done? And we've been thinking about it for so long. Well, I said something to this effect. Well, if you have, why don't we do it?
Yeah,
something to that effect. And it's, well, right, that's what we want to do. But then they said, but we just don't have, it's going to cost a lot of money. There were $18,000 in the fund at that time. And that was not very much seed money to start a church on. And I said, well, it seems to me that with the loyalties that you have with this congregation, and the chances are you might have accumulated a few material goods along the way, and you combine those two with the kind of loyalties that you have, I don't see any reason. Why don't we do it? And that is about, I think, what you're talking about.
I will tell you the words that you said, and this is what they told me. I will come if I can build a church.
Okay, yeah.
That was it.
Right.
So they said,
I
okay.
didn't realize I was that blunt, but I was leading into it, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Okay.
you did come. And you started your pastorate here. Also, you did a lot of homework. You're getting to know the members, going over the neighborhood, ringing doorbells, talking to everyone you met, and about this, the drawings for the vision of the church. That was quite a thing, wasn't it?
It really was, and that is very remarkable. And to possibly, I maybe was, under normal conditions, I suppose I could have been said to be a little bit over enthusiastic, or possibly I was dreaming too big a dream, but I found out that I wasn't, because in the January meeting, following January 10th, I think it was, this congregation made some very big decisions, and they affected all of the years of ministry that I was here. And those were these, and I wrote them down just so I would not forget them, but I realized that I wouldn't forget them anyway. The number one thing on our agenda was, of course, to celebrate the 100th anniversary. And to do that, we were going to put up a symbol of the traditions and the values that were represented in this congregation, and that this church had stood for, and something here to the glory of the God that they worship. And therefore, the first decision was to build a church. That they made. The second was that we would invite the national convention of the Augustana Church here during our centennial year, and that was a national, almost international, because Canada was involved too. Delegates from the church. The third was that we would host the International Holy Communion worship service here when the World Council of Churches met in Evanston. That was the other big thing. So 4 things we decided on celebrating on that day. And they were all worked through eventually.
Absolutely. And I remember the financing, like you say. We were selling bricks to any and all who even came to look at the hole that they were starting to dig there. And I know you did that very, very much. And now there was a little trouble with the building of the church. Do you remember what happened there?
Trouble?
Yes, there was trouble. There was a spring down there, and that was one thing that they had to overcome.
We had to divert that.
Yeah.
So there's still a spring running out of this water.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, the structural engineers and others involved in it worked out a solution to that. So I don't think you've ever had any evidence of it.
No, there hasn't been. They were only hoping that one day they had thought enough to bring the spring water up and let people drink it. Yeah, that's right.
Come to the wells.
That's right. And then you put in the chapel as part of the situation, and that, of course, you saw that Mrs. Porch took care of that.
Right.
The builder's chapel.
And she did it with such generosity and grace.
Yes. And of course, you know about her father, Lanquist. He built the Wrigley Building, the Cubs Park, People's Gas Building, some of the steel mills out south. And when he saw Mr. Wrigley on Michigan Avenue, he says, Lanquist, I want you to build a building over here. He says, okay. They shook hands, and that was it. Nothing at all, no contract they didn't have to have.
That was a wonderful era in the life of both industry and people in this nation. You could shake hands on a deal, and it was as good as gold.
Yes,
So,
yes. Now let's see. Also, when you started the church, you were talking about the windows in the chapel, the history of the church, leaving a couple of windows empty for the future, and the pews and the cross in the front, the lectern, the pulpit, everything was something which you had thought of. And all those windows in the back of the church, which depicted the things that were started in the church, like the hospital and the mission society and all the other things. I think that was wonderful. Then you had two weddings here, the very first, and you mentioned about Mr. Kinsman. It was his daughter that was one of the first, and the Silverstrom boy.
That's right.
Yeah, two first weddings, and the scaffoldings were not taken down yet. Yes, those were good. That's right. That's right. And here. And your ministry has been pretty good. From a membership of around 600, you finally brought it up to over 1,400. But that was a lot of work. And then about that time, when did you feel that you needed a co-pastor? Remember?
Quite recall the date. Do you?
No, I wouldn't know the date, but I think it was around that time. You felt that you did need, with 1,400 people, it was a lot.
But may I say, prior to that, I think that might have been about 3 years before that or so. Could have been about 50.
Not too much.
But you speak here in the singular as though I had done that. Do you know that we had, at one time, we had 25 volunteers who combed the community. We had two, well, for
I
you,
was with.
and you were with it. And we had surveys, and we had these visits. And then when these people would discover someone who might be potential members of our congregation, then our intern, we had interns at the time, we would send them on the second call. But on the last call, I would go there. So I had a privilege of being in every home in this parish. And I knew all the people who lived there, what they did and saw. That was so that it took lots of people to do that.
Yes, I know, but it took somebody to give the push.
Well,
And you were the one that had the energy and the enthusiasm to do it.
well, thank God that happened, but I've got to give credit to the people. You couldn't have done. You don't do these things alone, you know.
Oh, I don't know. It's it needs somebody to give the push to her.
I never thought the day would come when you and you're such a dear friend, would ever sit and have an argument.
This really isn't an argument. No, but it's a wonderful thing, and that's right. That's right. And now, let me see. You have anything further to say about this, about the building of the church itself, or anything of that sort at the time? Oh, I have to say this. We have one thing that is in this church that only one church in the world has it. That's what they tell me. That is what you put on the hand of pointing up to God on our apex of the church. And that's, I think that's one of the marvelous things, that we have something different from any other church. It's a beautiful thing.
That was a bit of inspiration, I guess. When I speak about the church, I think we ought to record for the sake of history that just 2 years from the time, hardly that, from the time we decided to build, we broke ground. Mm-hmm. That was on July 22nd, 51. And I made note of this, that actually Walter Goranson was the chairman of the building committee, Victor Erickson was the chairman of the finance committee. But today, I noticed, as I looked about the church, that among the people who were on the first building committee, there are only 2 people left on this anniversary day, and they were both in church today. And that was Robert Kinsman and Marion Peterson.
Is that
So that
right?
has happened. And I was thinking, that's one of the things that when we get older, we feel kind of impoverished every time some of these dear people that we've worked with are taken home, and the periphery of our life gets smaller and smaller, but their memories are so dear to us. But I thought of these people this morning, and what they did for us, and they're gone, and we're left here, surviving, but filled with
Just
grateful memories.
I think that's wonderful, yes. And let's see, we have a little more time. There was so many things here that we wanted to do. We did have a fire up in the gym one time, and that was quite a problem too, wasn't it?
Well, it was. That was after we built the church. But I remember that after we had that fire, somebody called me from the radio station, and I told them that I was thinking for us to celebrate the church was on fire. And I said, in my whole ministry, it's the first time I preached such a great sermon that I put the church on fire. And that got in the Chicago Tribune. But anyway, it was just one of the.
Oh, sure. I should say. Well, now I want to bring your thoughts to around 1954, and I'm not sure of the date, when you called all the women's groups together and suggested that we merge into one large organization, because you felt the Synod would eventually do that anyway. So you wanted to make a test case of our women to see what happened. You remember that?
I remember that, and I always had faith in old Emmanuel, always started new things.
Yeah, that
I'm sure of that.
That really did. And, well, we all agreed that it was a good idea, and our first president was you, Violet. Now let's talk to you about that. What are your thoughts on that thing, that situation, and how you handled it and everything?
Well, as you say, no other church that I really knew of had done that. Well, there was talk in a couple churches that I knew of, but I didn't know of any that had really gone ahead with it. But I was thinking about this week, and I jotted down a few thoughts here, and do you mind if I read?
Go right ahead.
Since receiving your letter and requesting this interview, we have enjoyed reflecting on our wonderful years at Immanuel, and in particular, my special memories of the merging of the women's groups into one unified organization. There were many new members, as you just have said, and so many of these women had not been integrated into the programs, the women's programs of the church. Furthermore, the congregation of Olivet had been joined the church, and there was all this potential of leadership, and they were great leaders in that church, and they should be integrated into the church. And there was a trend in that direction in the whole church, and so we met, as you say. Eric called the people together. So it was important to provide for all these women to be integrated in the program, and so also that each woman would be introduced to all the phases of the work of the church. They had all been doing wonderful work in their own way, and this way we felt we could pool their resources and instead of working separately. I won't go into any further detail about that, but after, as we say, several meetings, it was come to a vote, and it was unanimous, which we could never, believe that it could after the long history of Immanuel and its tradition. But on the other hand, knowing the history of Immanuel, we were really not surprised at their pioneering spirit either, because that was the story of Immanuel right from the beginning. And this turned out to be a beautiful experience of cooperation and grace by the women. And to tell you the truth, I had no idea of ever being present with this group. And but I think they felt that I knew maybe the women through the new member groups that had joined, and I knew the women quite well, and so they thought maybe that I should do it. And so after much thought and prayer, I decided to do it. I have many other fond memories of Immanuel, but as I was thinking about, they belong to the intimate associations with so many people who were understanding of my place in the life of the parish and expressed their love and encouragement in so many ways. So I felt honored, I really felt honored to be chosen the first president. And what could I do without you gals? You, remember Hazel Lulu? She started up, and
She was your vice president.
yes, and then she moved to New York.
Yeah.
And you should, I don't know why you weren't in the first place.
No. Well, there was a very good reason. Yes, well, I'll tell you, I know that all these women were delighted to work with you, work under you, because you were so friendly and nice, and you were all over everywhere. You'd walk through the kitchen when the ladies were there, and you'd comment on what nice things they were doing. You were every place that they were, and you know the women liked that. They liked to be noticed and everything. Well, I know that not one time, but several times where there was things here that you wanted help. There was something that came up. You called on Maya Nelson down the block, and she'd come running over to help whenever it was. And she certainly was thrilled to be considered with the group. She was very sorry that she's not with us today. But everything was worked out beautifully. Now, is there anything further that you want to say about your...
I was just reminded that, we had to make our own constitution.
That's right.
We had no national constitution to go by, and it was a pretty involved constitution, but it worked. And then 4 years later, when the National Women's Group decided to go into the unified program, I believe you adopted. We were not here then, but I think you adopted.
We had to adopt theirs, but ours worked awfully well.
Yeah, it really did. We had control of everything. I mean, it was smooth.
It was. It worked out just beautifully. I know it did. And, well, now, 30 years ago, you had another birthday, a 50th birthday. And at this time, I'm reminiscing now, and at this time, the board, they wanted to have a big celebration. Well, the women's group, they wanted to have one. And they kind of bickered, and all of a sudden they said, well, why take two of them? Let's have a combined one and see what we can work out. So, all right, we did that. We said we're going to have a special combined meeting. Well, I think you remember the date. It was in April 1958, and I think it was a Friday night. Wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah, I thought it was a Sunday, but I found out it was a Friday. You and Vi were invited out to dinner by Mr. and Mrs. Angster and Dr. and Mrs. Fern,
Right.
and to dinner, and then brought back to the church with some subterfuge, whatever. And at the door, you were met by Joe Bonner and brought into the church, and you were ushered up to the front by the board. I remember that quite well. The church was full, and there was special music, and then all the congregation sang happy birthday to you.
Wonderful.
I've never seen him white. He was that night.
I know you were very happy to sit on the chair. And, well, after many greetings by the various church groups, and I know this for a fact, you wondered why Mrs. Angster talked for the LCW. I was president at that time. You couldn't understand, but after a while, after all the group, then I came on and I said to you, Pastor Gustavson, This is your life. And from then on, there was a story and pictures and slides by Willard and Dick Emlenworth, those things. And from time to time, there was voices on the loudspeaker. And then people came out, I was going to say out of the woodwork, but they came out of the doors. Friends of yours, relatives, a teacher from the East, and so on. You remember that.
Oh, never forget that.
Yeah.
We had that wonderful book that you sent
Well,
to us.
I wrote that myself, and I was very happy. And every once in a while, I review it.
Yes, and do you remember us meeting in the gymnasium for you to get all the facts, you and I?
Yes, your wife, certainly did a good job. She snitched all kinds of pictures
A lot
and
of
everything.
sneaky detective work.
Oh, I tell you,
We
yes.
were afraid when he came through or something while we
Oh
were.
yeah, we were busy. We were busy. But it was a pleasant, very great pleasure and everything.
And you were so wonderful.
You know, it's an interesting thing when I look back at those years of my life. I remember that Kierkegaard, the famous theologian philosopher, used to speak of the moment, you know, as though there's a concentration of the best verities in the moment. And these are kind of moments like that, like the one this morning, for example, in church. And then that moment. There are just a few like that in the life and the history of any one person. And you people enhanced the moment for me in many, many ways. Most unique. And it said something, I think it said even more about the congregation and its capacity for love than for me, because, you know, we all go through our regular career, you know, successes and so on. But there's something about that congregation, the love just sort of spilled
You're a
over.
generation.
No, I'm fourth, but my folks were here from 1881
That's right.
on both sides of the family, and I was born into the church, you might say.
I'm glad I knew your people, your folks.
Yes. Oh, may I tell you this? I have to. 2 weeks after you came here, you were at the door shaking hands with people, and my dad was there. And as we went out, you said, "Hello, Nels." Now, Dad was thrilled. Nobody ever called him Nels. They all called him Thorson. Only the family dared to call him that. And he said, "That is a man that knows people and that can tell anything he says to anybody." He thought it was just simply wonderful.
They wasn't insulted.
Oh, he thought that was marvelous, that you could go in and find out that he had a first name. It was wonderful.
Well, I'm glad I could touch with his humanness at that point.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yes, sir. And let's see now.
These are
You know, I don't, regarding this, this is your life, I don't know of any other pastor anywhere in America who has ever had a "This is your life" given to them. I have looked in the books and looked in the Lutherans and everything, but I don't know of anyone. And you know, I think that's wonderful because it's special.
And then to have it narrated in a book.
And
Yeah,
the
just
pictures,
for some
we had
pictures.
pictures.
And those pictures, we snitched and everything. The little boy with the little red wagon and everything, bringing up, and the girl in the park. That I'm going to marry her. All those things, they were a wonderful thing. I know. Now,
I'm glad I did. You know, whatever success I had at Immanuel,
No.
I attributed just an awfully good portion of it to Violet.
Remember,
well, that's wonderful.
you're a clergyman and you shouldn't tell a lie.
Yeah, he doesn't. Now, there's one
But
other
I'm older
thing.
now, I don't lie as much as I used to.
Before I finish, I want to talk. You did other things, and after you left us here, you started another church. Really started it.
Still
And
going.
it's still going, yes. That's up there in the village church.
An experimental ministry in the high-rise dense apartment area.
Have you been there recently?
We drove coming down. Susan brought us there, so we've seen it again, and it's 20 years old now. It's still operating and reaching the needs of many of the subcultural groups that surround it in downtown setting. The unique kind of church,
Yeah.
meeting the unique problems of the area it serves.
It's different from others. We were there, I guess it was 2 years ago
Well,
now.
you made a comment. They still have the organ that you people.
That's right, they have the organ, and we went there
And sweet
and
music as always.
the pastor said, because I looked at it and he says something about it, and I says, well, we were the one that donated. He says, you know, I'm surprised. He says, I didn't know who the Carlsons were, and I kind of wondered.
We were talking with Don, and Don was the pastor that you knew.
Yes.
Was there, and we mentioned something about Edna. Oh yes, Edna Willard. He remembers you from your contributions and help there.
Well, and we've met him several times, different places too. Yes. And now we're getting back to our 80th year, 30 years after that. We're here again and hoping this will be a very memorable time for you. We are eagerly waiting for your sermon in church later this morning. And we love you. We wish you well, both of you, and hope you don't have to retire for the 4th time, but can keep on with your golden years.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
How can we say more than thank you?
Thank you.
And to tell you that we're just overwhelmed by the grace of God and how that grace has been reflected in the lives of you people, all of you people living there. It's been a great and enriching experience, to say the least, for us.
And it's a wonderful memory for us and a history which will go down in our Immanuel coffers, or what would you say? I don't know. Archives, that's right. Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Well, thank you so much for coming and for being with us and for having this talk.
Do you think we'll be with you on the 150th? We hope for coming.
I don't think I will. I don't know whether you will, but I don't think I will.
Well, you can dream, can't you?
That's right.
Good. Thank you.